Let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to look at how a 29-year-old Carthaginian general engineered literally the most devastating tactical annihilation in military history. I mean, we're talking about an event so monumental that military academies are still teaching it today. This is the story of Hannibal Barca. The guy found himself with absolutely no city to resupply him, zero reinforcements coming, and yet he somehow orchestrates an absolute masterpiece of warfare.
Section 1. The Scale of Defeat. It's August, 216 BC. Our story starts on a scorching August morning, right out on a dusty plain in southern Italy. Just picture the tension as the sun rises blood red over the battlefield. The stakes here are astronomically high. The Romans brought in 86,000 soldiers. Think about that, 86,000. It was the largest army the Republic had ever assembled in its history. And across from them, fewer than 50,000 Carthaginians. Hannibal's guys were vastly outnumbered, totally isolated, and completely surrounded by a hostile empire that basically wanted them erased from the map. The terrifying reality of those odds played out in just absolute slaughter. We're talking 50 to 70,000 dead in a single afternoon. To put that into perspective, that is more soldiers lost in one day than the US lost in the entire Vietnam War. By sunset, Rome would suffer an apocalyptic loss inside a killing box that was just 4 miles wide. This wasn't some gradual retreat, It was an absolute massacre. It was so complete that generals from Napoleon all the way to Norman Schwarzkopf would study it like it was scripture.
Which brings us to Section 2, the Impossible Campaign, gate-crashing Italy.
To really get how this bloodbath happened, we have to realize just how insane it was that Hannibal was even in Italy to begin with. He wasn't just invading Roman territory, he was totally gate-crashing it. 2 years prior, in 218 BC, he achieved the impossible. He literally dragged his army, which, yes, famously included war elephants, right over the freezing Alps in the dead of winter. He lost nearly half his men to frostbite, starvation, and hostile tribes before he even fought a single Roman. But once he got there, he immediately kicked off a massive winning streak. At the Trebia, then at Lake Trasimene, he systematically destroyed a Roman army in this fog-covered ambush that was so intense the men fighting for their lives actually didn't notice a literal earthquake happening right under their feet. Wild, right?
Moving on to Section 3, Rome raises an army. The Republic doubles down.
So in a state of just pure, unadulterated panic, after these crushing defeats, the desperate Republic decided to do what desperate republics do. They doubled down. They realized conventional tactics just were not working against this Carthaginian invader. So the Senate committed an almost unthinkable amount of manpower for the ancient world. They raised 8 legions. That's the 86,000 men we talked about earlier. Their strategy? Just hope that simple, brutal, overwhelming numbers would crush Hannibal once and for all. They basically just wanted to bulldoze him. But there was a catch. Section 4, a divided Roman command. Alternating daily. You see, Rome's massive juggernaut was severely hobbled by this structural weakness. They had this practice of splitting command between 2 consuls, and get this, they alternated leadership every single day. And the psychological contrast between these 2 leaders was just stark. On one side, you have Lucius Aemilius Paulus. He's cautious, he's experienced, and he's highly wary of Hannibal's tricks. On the other side, Gaius Terentius Varro. Varro was this brash, aggressive populist who was utterly convinced that Rome's only problem so far was just timidity. I mean, imagine handing the keys to a massive war machine back and forth daily between 2 guys with totally opposing worldviews. So the crucial thing to understand here is what happened on the days Varro was in charge. Varro firmly believed that victory just required marching his massive, overwhelming army straight into the enemy. His strategy was super simple, it was brutal, and it was incredibly straightforward. No nuance, no complex maneuvers, just sheer overwhelming forward momentum. And that leads us to Section 5, setting the perfect trap, understanding people. That reliance on brute force, that brings us to the true genius of Hannibal. He deeply understood human nature. He knew that Rome's massive force was actually a weapon that he could turn against them. He just had to bait a brash commander who thought superior numbers guaranteed an easy win. He figured that eventually the Roman Senate was going to put someone exactly like Varro in charge, a commander who just couldn't resist what looked like a sure thing. To pull this off, he needed the absolute perfect physical setting. Enter Cannae, a small supply town sitting right on the flat plains of Apulia. Now, for a guy like Varro, a huge flat plain looks like the perfect place to roll out his massive numerical advantage, right? There's no tricky terrain for the enemy to hide in. But for Hannibal, this flat, dusty ground was the perfect geographic stage to spring the ultimate tactical trap. He had found exactly what he was looking for.
As that unstoppable Roman war machine marched forward that scorching morning, totally confident in their sheer numbers and brute strength, we are left with one really profound question. How do you defeat an army twice your size? Well, the terrifying answer that Hannibal proved at Cannae is this. You do it by letting them think they're winning, right up until the trap snaps shut. It makes you think about how that applies even today, doesn't it? How often does overwhelming strength become the very weakness that leads to absolute ruin?